Thanks for inviting me, Natalie. So we've got the legislation slot now, last but not least. And I'm reading this, so it should be bang on 11 minutes. So the Climate and Nature Bill, or the CAN Bill for short, is a plan for new legislation to tackle the climate and nature crisis as one. The bill was designed by scientists and legal experts, and it's a cross-party campaign using the same mass mobilisation model that resulted in the Climate Change Act. If passed, the CAN Act would ensure that the UK has a clear direction of travel with a whole-of-government response to the emergency. It would create a legally binding strategy for delivering a just transition to a green economy. The public would be involved through a climate and nature assembly to find a fair way forward. We need a joined up legal framework so that our response to energy and climate challenges goes hand in glove with creating a resilient, nature-rich UK. The Climate Change Committee recently said the pace of climate change is outstripping the action taken to adapt to it. Its latest assessment report again shows the UK's adaptation strategy is completely inadequate. We're now reliant on radical land use change to free up and restore land for nature-based solutions. I want to touch on some of the reasons why this isn't happening and why we need stronger legislation. Current laws and policies aren't fit for the level of threat we now face. Legislation on climate isn't in line with our Paris Agreement commitment, and it's separated from legislation on nature. And there are too many gaps and conflicting policies. Just a few examples. Under the Environment Act, the apex target to halt decline in species abundance by 2030 is undermined by lack of targets for habitat connectivity, pesticides, and soil health. A serious conflict is caused by the target for nutrient pollution in water from agriculture, with only 40% reduction and not until 2038. The critically high levels of ammonia and nitrogen pollution on land aren't addressed at all. There's over-reliance on the environmental land management schemes without policy for food system change. Elms are expected to contribute 80% of the habitat creation target and 90% of the woodland cover target. Elms have potential, but are entirely voluntary and designed mainly within the food system status quo, so not capable of guaranteeing the transformation needed to deliver widespread land use change. There are no legally binding targets for reducing livestock density or for deer control. Without support for this, farmers are battling to be more nature-friendly while maintaining the status quo in terms of production and yield. Then there's the market to consider. Farmers manage 3/4 of UK land, but they can't hope to deliver ecological restoration at the scale needed because they're locked into an unsustainable and unfair market based on monoculture. The market's controlled by the integrated food, feed, and agrochemical industries. The unsustainable system they've created is bolstered by trade deals that further undermine UK farmers. Farming communities often feel alienated when agriculture is called out as the main driver of decline. These industries, while industry is left off the hook, these industries are the principal architects of decline. They need to be at the centre of the debate and be part of a strategy for a just transition. That must include support for new skills and jobs and a fix for the crippling unfairness in food supply chains where farmers can see as little as 1 penny in the pound profit. We need to decide what to prioritise, feeding people or feeding animals. As we've heard, the majority of UK land is used to feed livestock rather than people directly. Livestock are outcompeting people and wildlife for land, food and water, Almost 80% of our farmland is used to support livestock, including 40% of arable land. Less than 1% grows the fruit and vegetables that can feed more people using much less land. In 2021, Tesco gave evidence to the Environmental Audit Committee saying the UK's food strategy cannot be left to the market. They said they would support government-led action to help livestock farmers diversify to reduce meat and dairy consumption and increase fruit and veg. Great words, but we've seen no significant change because no large food business can act unilaterally without losing competitiveness and risking job losses. So we desperately need a holistic government-led plan for a just transition. Otherwise, we won't get buy-in from the public, farmers, or workers in other sectors. The consequences of a system dominated by monoculture and ultra-processed foods have become catastrophic for nature, but also public health and food security. This is not about consumer choice. Decades of marketing and loss leader campaigns have engineered our food system for profit, changing our culture and our landscape. Around £1 billion is spent annually advertising food and drink, but just 1% of that advertises fruit and veg. We can and must address that imbalance. DEFRA's 2022 Food Security Report warns of the huge risks to monoculture from flooding, drought and overheating. Most farmers aren't aware of that report. It predicts that heat stress in livestock is likely to increase by 1,000 to 3,000%, making it increasingly unviable. It's obviously not enough to adopt regenerative, nature-friendly, or even organic farming. The majority of farmers can't adapt and diversify sufficiently in a market that demands the current levels of monoculture. We need a significant market shift to bring diversity back to the food system and the landscape. We can produce more food for people using much less land. Smaller producers are key to build diversity and resilience. Last year, we worked with 2 local veg box schemes. Based on their output, with an average of 60 boxes per hectare, we calculated it would take roughly 500,000 hectares to supply each UK household with an average fruit and veg box. That's less than 3% of farmland. Small-scale organic producers rely on rich levels of biodiversity to grow a huge variety of fruit and vegetables, and multi-cropping delivers good yields. Riverford organic farmers have proved production can be scaled up to feed communities all over the country, but the subsidy system needs to change to allow farmers to shift the market. Fruit and veg growers receive less than £4,000 on average, compared with around £30,000 for other types of farming. Farmers generally need more support to build local supply chains and for direct sales to consumers. We need ambitious action. The Climate and Nature Bill creates a framework for a transition to a new way of thinking and dealing with our environment. It places international agreements into national legislation to make sure that we're acting in line with the latest science rather than what's considered politically viable. The bill's 2 apex targets are drawn from the Paris Agreement for 1.5, so that the UK tracks its cumulative emissions in line with its actual fair share of the remaining global carbon budget. And 2, the COP15 agreement, not just halting but reversing biodiversity loss, setting nature on a path to recover by 2030. The CAN bill ensures that we account for our entire emissions and ecological footprint throughout supply chains, at home and overseas. It includes all impacts on human health as well as nature, such as deforestation, land and water degradation, pollution and waste. It covers all related trade, transport and, importantly, financing of the above. It provides financial support for the most vulnerable communities and retraining for people in high impact industries, and that would include farming. Our short-term parliamentary system struggles to deliver laws and policies that can tackle such huge challenges. We're in danger of being hamstrung by culture wars, and increasingly the public sees politicians stoking division. That's why the bill includes a climate nature assembly informed by experts to involve the public in the process. In 2019, the Climate Assembly UK was convened by 6 cross-party parliamentary committees. It set out to determine the path to net zero with members of the public. It was extremely successful, though unfortunately not legally binding. But it showed that citizens are capable of much more radical decision-making than MPs because they're free from political constraints. We need to demonstrate that by working together, change is possible. Thank you. And we're always looking for scientists, more scientists to work with us. So if you're interested, please do get in touch.
Thank you, Jane. What kind of engagement have you had from the top tiers of the Labour Party and the Conservative Party? I see you've got 150 parliamentary backers.
Yeah, so we've had, we haven't got that many Conservative backers. I think we've got 4 or 5, sorry. Mike, sorry, I'm off mic. We haven't got that, to be perfectly honest, that many Conservative backers, but we do have good support from the Labour top tier.
Yeah? From shadow ministers?
Yes, we do, yeah. Well, Ed Miliband in particular.
Oh, really? Very interesting.
So quite hopeful there.
Any questions? At the back?
Thanks, that was really interesting. My name's Ash Simpkins. I'm a PhD student at the University of Cambridge. Obviously, this all sounds great, and I think from the climate angle, what it often actually misses, and this relates to some of the talks we heard earlier in the energy section, is the minerals needed to build these renewable energy, these photovoltaics. That often those rare minerals are offshore in biodiversity important areas, so you have massive nature impacts in extracting. So getting the climate targets addressed at scale might factor in the carbon value, but those metals then have massive biodiversity impacts. So how can, is there a way to try and balance that? Because often you can't recycle these metals. I don't think the technology is there yet. So how can we balance these really important problems, but they often conflict with each other, and those win-wins often don't exist?
Sure, yeah. So the bill doesn't deal with that kind of detail, but it does include the mitigation and conservation hierarchy. So we've been working with scientists at Oxford to address those issues. And because it's a framework, if we were to include that much detail, no MP would look at it. So it would be included in a strategy that would be come together with scientists, more legal experts, and as part of the Climate Nature Assembly to look at how that works, how it would work in detail. So it sounds like a bit of a cop-out answer, but it's not covered in detail, but you know, the mitigation and conservation hierarchy should cover those things.
Hi. I'm obviously very supportive of this bill, and I'd like to add that you mentioned Riverford, which is based in the South Hams, so I'll just put a plug for South Hams there. And also 0 Hour, I think, started in the South Hams. But the one concern I have about the bill is the fact that you've got elected politicians, but then you have a citizens' assembly, and the bill, as far as I understand it, would require the politicians to listen to the assembly and act on it. And the assembly is not elected, and so there is a sort of a bit of a problem with democracy there, and maybe that's what needs to be done, but I just would be interested in your comments on that.
Yeah, so the assembly is really so that the public can be involved in the decision making. As I said, it's informed by scientists and other experts. And to be very specific, ideas that come out of that, they have to have 66% agreement within the Assembly before they're put forward. And they would also be moderated by the JNCC and the Climate Change Committee. And then that Assembly is helping to create the strategy for moving forward for how we reach these targets. Then that strategy is put before Parliament. So we don't bypass the parliamentary system at all.
I think that's all we've got time for. And now we're on to the key bit, which is